All right, greetings and welcome to my channel. We're live. Today we're going to be talking about when servitors attack. Well, mostly we're going to be talking about servitors becoming self-aware. Sometimes, if you mistreat your servitors, that can lead to servitors attacking. So we're also going to be talking about the reasons to not mistreat or be cruel to servitors or other created beings. Good evening, Romstead. Glad to see you. We're just barely getting started here. As I was saying, we will be talking about, mostly going to be talking about servitors becoming self-aware. We will also, hey, Black Unigriffin, greetings. While we're talking about servitors becoming self-aware, some of that is leading to servitors attacking, because that's when this can happen. Most often, a servitor will attack if well, there are a few reasons that a servitor could become an actual issue, but a lot of times it's because either you're mistreating the servitor or you haven't created it properly and you've left openings for well, your own destructive impulses within your own destructive impulses within your psyche that have been looking for a way to vent. And that can be a little tough to swallow at times, I suppose, but it is certainly part of what happens or can happen. Okay, so gonna go ahead and load me a bowl here real quick. Let's see, where shall we start then? Okay, so guess we'll go ahead and get started now. Starting with a Lone Tree dry cider, and then I've got a bit of the same type of wine as last time. A little stronger than the cider, though. So I'll have to keep a close eye on myself once I switch over. Okay, so when servitors attack and servitors becoming self-aware. Now, like we talked about in the last episode about servitors and tulpas, servitor typically means a fairly simple being, but it's become kind of the catch-all term for all of the created beings in general. So we'll be talking about all of them. But yeah. So the first question here, treating your servitor trash and giving nothing but negativity is equivalent of treating an extremely dangerous cyborg or robot that eventually take you out once it gains its awareness. This is exactly an important part of what you're doing, of what I'm getting at here with when servitors attack. Because if you have a servitor for very long, if you get it very complex and have it for an extended period of time, it's going to start developing some sort of self-awareness. And the way you treat it affects the way it behaves. And if you are cruel to your servitor, it could very easily eventually turn on you. And that's why it's important. And not just to be kind to your servitor, or say not cruel, but to actually be kind to your servitor and consider what it's doing when it's not directly doing what it is being told to do, how it gets its food. Because this is one of the things where we can get servitor attacks. Isn't just being cruel, but allowing the thing to sit idle. This is often where self-awareness will develop. And we're going to get into whether or not you want a servitor to be self-aware, because sometimes it's a good idea. I find I need to explain things to mine because they can be a bit lazy and cut corners. I never get angry with them. Yeah, I mean, it's important that they're given clear instructions. And some of them can be quite lazy. They develop different personalities. But directing anger at your servitor, it's never it's never helpful unless you're feeding anger into the servitor for it to do something. Like feeding it with anger is one thing, but getting angry at your servitor is like yelling at yourself in essence, because they are something that is a reflection of you until they become fully self-aware. Then they can start to more fully detach. But even then, it's more important to be kind because it's going to start making its own choices at that point. But as I was saying, um, leaving a servitor sitting idle is actually one of the most dangerous things that can happen with a servitor, because if it's running and it's not doing its thing, that gives it time to come up with its own ideas. And so, when you're developing any of these creatures, tulpas, servitors, egregores, golems, especially with things that are golems, which are they're one of the most um what I mean by a golem is an astral being whose astral form matches its physical form. So you're getting as close, it's often one of the most complex beings. You're getting as close as you can to it having an actual material form. So something like that is almost guaranteed to become self-aware. In fact, you should just work it into the programming in the first place. But especially with something like that, there is a big importance on it not sitting idle. You need to have come up with, when you're designing the creature, what it does when it's not working, when it's not doing stuff for you. If you have ways of having it always busy, like if it's a guardian servitor, you could have it constantly patrolling. But even then, there's possibility of it getting bored with nothing happening. So it's a good idea to create in the servitor things that it likes to do. Give it its hobbies. Give it things that it will enjoy. Specifically, give it the ability to enjoy things. Because without that being programmed in there, it might not necessarily be there, but joy finds a way often. I program scripted mine in my notebook to sort of feed on my satisfaction and joy when they get stuff right. And they go dormant or temporary death if I'm inactive because I had an injury. Yeah, see, that makes sense. There you go. You, at the very least, have it so that they're set into an inactive state when they're not operating. I have a video that where I talk about replicating servitors, and in there's servitors that come to life when certain things happen. Like there's ones that there was one to make sure a door got closed. Often these will be guardian servitors, but they're ones that should sit in a dorm that are designed to sit in a dormant state, inactive, until something happens that sets off their programming. Like if they're guarding a room, and whenever anyone gets close to the room who meets certain criteria, as in they're a threat. Hello, my love. As it, whenever someone enters that area that meets the criteria of being a threat, then once they enter the space, that activates the servitor. It runs its program, does what it's supposed to do, and then immediately goes dormant again. And though that is something, it prevents the boredom. Going dormant is a great way to deal with the stuff. It prevents the boredom, prevents the thing from going out and looking for entertainment, looking for ways to feed, because it's not in an active state where it's thinking about these things. It's just kind of like turning them off. Mine are sort of stone fetish pixie little Chinese beast gods that bring money, luck, and protection, made of jade and some other ones. Very cool. Hey, Ricky. Glad to see you. Now, myself, I tend to make rather complex beings, and a lot of times I will choose to make them self aware. Like I said, with golems or anything like that, you're gonna get that, right? Once you start giving the thing a physical form that matches its body, it's gonna start getting some self-awareness. Especially anything where you're asking it to make decisions. Because once it gets to the point that it's making decisions, it has to perceive the situation in order to do that. And once you get actual perception rather than just a if this then, like here's where it gets the difference between artificial intelligence. Now, I'm not saying artificial intelligence isn't self-aware. I don't know enough about it. But your lower levels of it that are just responding to if then, essentially, I don't want to use the word algorithm. That's not the word I'm looking for. Decision trees. It's like a decision tree. If this happens, then you respond this way. It's a massive decision tree, but that's basically what these MLMs are. And you can program that into a servitor. You could get one that is very complex by telling it just if this happens, do this, if this happens, do this, if that happens, do this, and program out all of the scenarios. And that can keep it from being self-aware and keeping it very precise. But once it has to make a decision, once it perceives a situation and has to make a choice on its own, now you're taking one step towards, well, perceiving. And that's a big step towards consciousness. Once it actually perceives for itself, it has become a being. It has become something that is not completely inside of you. That doesn't mean that such a thing can't be self-absorbed and become returned into part of your perception, depending on how you made it, of course. So, see, now that's one interesting bit to this here is if you make a servitor that is what's the word I'm looking for? That is completely made up of your energy. Yeah. All the energy put into it was your life force energy. This is something that even if it learns to perceive, no matter how complex it gets, it is still in some ways a part of you. And even though it has begun to perceive, and once something perceives, it gains its own reality. That is a part of you that you can absorb back in. That is something that can be brought back in, and you aren't going to have to deal with it ever again. Now, once you've created something from life force energy outside of yourself, and it has become its it has become its own being. Now you're dealing with something that, in some ways, is going to be around forever. There are ways to completely wipe the thing away so that it's just the perception itself going somewhere else, but it's going to exist in some ways forever. Oh yeah, I've seen stuff like that before. Some people script program their servitors to live in their body parts, like their finger or toes. That's a bit too weird for me. Um, yeah, I have seen this many times. It is a interesting way to go about it. Like people say, "Oh, well, this pinky belongs to my servitor." When I worked as a caretaker for developmentally disabled adults, definitely not supposed to say these people's names, but there was a schizophrenic guy there who had a friend that lived in his finger, and he talked to his finger like this, and it seemed to be a very powerful servitor. I've never seen it actually do anything. Hey, Kira, good to see you. We're talking about servitors and how and when they become self-aware. Of course, I named it when servitors attack, and we are going to talk some about that, of course, and what to do when they attack. But first, we're talking about them becoming self-aware and how to prevent attacks. Like I say, the most important one, other than not being cruel to it, because once it becomes self-aware, it could retaliate. This is something that has happened. I've seen this happen to people. There's ones that you get boredom And once they get bored, they just start coming up with all kinds of crazy ideas on their own. Like if you leave them with a big open space, don't put them into a dormant state. Don't give them something that they do when they're um not doing your work, not doing works for you. They can come up with all kinds of crazy stuff and start adding stuff to their personality. Kind of had a paradigm shift back to my water work, but other than that, here to chill. I never dabbled with servitor work. It's a particular field. I can actually see why some people don't like servitor work. I do a lot of it. It's something that just came naturally to me even as a kid. I was always making up little characters and having them do stuff and making up things in my stuffed animals to protect me from this or that. Or the opposite, seeing faces in the blankets when I was a kid. I had to smooth them all out so I didn't feel like the blanket was watching me. It's just kind of part of my nature, I think. But they're a lot of work. Things like that require maintenance. You actually have to consider the servitor and its rights in a lot of ways. I remember back in the old days, there used to be people talking about how their tulpa had memories, like past lives or something like that. Yeah, old days, the internet tulpa forums. I know what you meant, and I've heard of things like that before as well. Um, I mean, I think in cases like that, what's going on is the tulpa's memories, or the person's memories, are getting into their tulpa. Like, because a tulpa, in the normal way that a tulpa would be created, there is no outside energy force. So there wouldn't really be any way that I can conceive of. Now, I could be wrong, but there's no way I can conceive of where a tulpa would be someone who, what do you call it? A tulpa would be something that is made completely of the self. So there's no way for a second soul to get in there. There's no way for someone to be reincarnated. Yes, he's been here before. I'll let you get it, Felix. You got mad last time when I got him. Anyways, so yeah, when it's oh shoot, I got distracted by the by Eric there. Okay, so what was I saying? Tulpas. Yeah. So what I think is going on there is that the person's past life memories are coming through in the tulpa, right? And I think that's what's going on there. I mean, maybe there's some way for, 'cause I mean, a tulpa, if you do it right, could be on the edge of an etheric being, and maybe like I don't know. I That's my theory, is that it's they're being the person's memories are coming out in the tulpa. In my random travels over the internet tulpa forums, there was actually a guy who was from some unknown covenant group who studied servitor tulpas, and he himself stumbled accidentally. Yeah, I was just gonna ask myself. I don't know what you mean that he himself stumbled accidentally. I mean, sorry, there's something bugging me right here. Oh, okay. Anyways, I'll worry about that later. So, um, oh yeah. Well, there is the possibility. Like some people are much more concerned with this than others, but there is the possibility of some other being getting into a being that you're trying to create. It's not that common. Like it can happen, especially if there's someone with an outside influence trying to create that. There's really very easy to prevent that by simply stating when you're creating the servitor and the tulpa that it is a brand new creation. That's the thing about a lot of this stuff. It's almost like making a legalese contract because you just have to think of it as you just have to think of it and make sure that it is not part of the creation process. Like, okay, this is going to be a brand new creation if you're concerned with that. Um, you can also create the anchor point in a protective circle in which only the spirit that you are creating can be connected to that anchor point. Tulpas, however, if it's a shared tulpa, there's a possibility for that. If it's not a shared tulpa and it really is just a tulpa as in something you made up, unless there was something already there influencing you to make up it, as in it's giving you the ideas and you think you're imagining it, but really what you're doing is seeing the characteristics of the being. That's the only way someone could really sneak into that particular type of being. Now, this can be something that can be done intentionally. Like there's a few beings that I would call a tulpa or a servitor that is actually a particular being. The one that the most notable one is a very well-known being, but she intentionally takes on a form to enact a role. And it's actually a form very similar to her actual image, but she essentially uses that servitor as a wearable tulpa. Um, that's basically what angels are. In the way that I understand angels, right? Is they are the servitors of a larger God form. They are beings created by whatever word you want to use there, if you believe in those systems, and made to perform a task. In fact, in some versions of Christianity, that's why the angels are jealous of man, is because they were never given free will. Yeah. And that's another thing you can do with your servitors is specifically say, you cannot attack me, you cannot do this, you cannot do that. A really common technique is to put your own well-being and theirs as connected, as in your anything that harms you harms them as well. Okay, yeah, that makes more sense. I mean, I'm just talking about from like the belief system point of view, but when I'm gonna read it out because people can't see the chat later and be like, "What is he talking about?" I think that angels are created by humans so that they never existed and they serve a lost form that region. I didn't read that quite right. My handwriting, my typing is horrible as well. But yes, I would totally agree. I believe the entire Christian monotheistic religions, those are all the whole thing's tulpas. It's tulpas all the way down, right? So yeah, absolutely. The angels, the Christian God itself, these are all things made up. There is no one God. Yeah. There are beings that believe they are a one God, perhaps. Um, if you've been paying attention to if you've been paying attention to the overall plot of what I think over the series, as far as that goes, I believe that the being behind all these monotheistic religions was taken out on May 5th, 2012. That there was something that was behind them. He had he was wearing a whole bunch of these wearable tulpas. There was a Baptist tulpa and a Catholic tulpa and a Islam, Judaism, all of them. that there was one God behind all the different people of the book, and that being has been removed. Anything left is just residual belief. And that's why those religions are all acting super crazy now. Especially the evangelicals. They're going freaking ballistic. They can feel that their God is dead, so they've replaced their God with Donald Trump. I think that's why they worship that guy. But I do believe that are many of the beings that people worship, angels, so many of the things we call demons, many of the different things we work with are exactly that. They're shared tulpas. They are shared tulpas created by the idea that people shared belief. In fact, along these same lines, this is why people can be haunted by it. You know, the clown It. That's what seems to be one of the most famous ones that people actually see this thing from a movie coming after them. And that's what's going on there. There's a shared tulpa. There's that many people that are afraid of it, of Pennywise, that there's kind of a thing there. I'm surprised it didn't happen with Freddy Krueger, especially where he's something that's in your dreams. You know, but that being said, I mean, I think part of the reason with Freddy Krueger, at least for me, because for a while there, especially when I had really got into the Christian thing when I was younger, and had quit putting my ideas of protecting myself from in my own hands into this big sky daddy, I got a little scaredy. I got a little scaredy for a while there. My courage went way down. But even during that short period of time where I was able to be afraid of scary movies, the only one that didn't scare me was Freddy Krueger. Because I mean, what is a dude with some pointy claws gonna come into my dreams and try to push me around? Dude, I'm fighting dragons on the regular. Guy with some pointy freaking knives on his fingers. Get out of here. I feel that scripting, writing, journaling, programming is important in writing. Otherwise, I don't bother. Yeah, you absolutely need to script everything as much as possible when you're creating a being. The details, the fine points and details are absolutely vital. Oh yeah, see, but then there are things that we call like what you're saying. Some I think are, some I think won't. It's a case by case spiritual. The spiritual world is it full of a blind infinity. Absolutely. Absolutely. I was actually just thinking about getting to that. Doesn't look like Max is with us here tonight because they probably would have said something by now. But there are beings that call themselves angels that I think are beyond that. And created however they were created, some of them, plenty of them, have had to make decisions. Lots of them. And I was just talking about servitors and tulpas becoming self aware. Yeah. This can happen with angels too. Like one in particular, who was the first one I thought of when we started down that line of discussion, is Azazel or Iblis in Islam. It's the same being, the scapegoat. Uh, this being is one that I have worked with. I've had many interactions with over time. They are definitely a very intelligent and self-aware being. Whether they were created by belief, whether they came from somewhere else and they're just something that kind of fed on that belief. Because there's another one where uh, Hungry Ghost, I believe it was you, said something. Let me go back and look. Might be March of Time. Oh yeah, it was March of Time. Um. Anyways, you said something about how they can inhabit tulpas, and I kind of was a little dismissive of it at the time, but let me come back to that because there are definitely areas where I agree. And that is a lot of these beings that we put a lot of belief into. Yeah, there are things that can if it's shared like that, it is something that something can climb into and wear it. Just like we wear wearable, just like we make up tulpas and then put them on, or at least I do. We've talked about that last time, like my Froggy Dundee tulpa. And there are beings that will sometimes take on those roles. So like I don't know, I don't feel qualified to say what Azazel is in the end. But other than a self-aware independent being, whether he was created by one of the things that were created within the within the monotheistic belief systems, or if he's something that took on that role at some point, I don't know. But just because he was if he was a created being, that doesn't mean he was self-aware. I mean, that's part of what tonight's episode is about, is that these beings can become self-aware quite easily. I have several myself. Like I talked about Manatellu before when he attacked somebody. And I mean, didn't attack me. I've never actually had one of my servitors directly attack me, except for, well, man, I tell you, when I first took him from a bottle egregore and he disappeared for a few years, when I opened the bottle, I did get very sick. But that wasn't an attack so much as a parasitic drain on my system. Yeah. And he needed a whole lot of life force energy to build himself up before he left. It that kind of an attack. And then I didn't see him again for years, so I mean, but it was more like a birthing sickness. Yeah, he just took so much out of me when I opened up his egregore bottle. He took a whole lot of my life force energy with him as he was making the transfer into an actual etheric being that did not require a bottle or jar as an anchor point. And even then, it took a few years before he was able to fully manifest and tell me what he needed next. All right, we're not going to try and fix that during this. I happen to have a second pipe here. Now, the place where I have witnessed the most attacks, I have never made this mistake myself because I've seen it happen to several people. It's people who are doing blood magic and make blood servitors. From what I remember, in order to make a 12-pair servitor and soul, you basically put out some kind of light from your heart area into your servitor or tulpa. That is certainly one way of doing it. I mean, there are lots of ways of producing your life force energy, but there is a sparkling within the chest that is one of the best visualizations you can get for creating a servitor. Now, you want to be careful how much of that sparkle you use at a time. Yeah, that's not a type of energy I'm usually talking about much because it is like, if you pump out all your aura in your chi, you can get mana burn, right? Where you just like wore out and you need to just get your form back in. And this is one of the times where I suggest like milk baths, long soaks, that sort of thing is for dealing with mana burnout. But that sparkle, giving out too much of that sparkle can have actual physical health effects. That's part of what was going out with Manatellu. That's part of how I got so incredibly sick. But he also actually like kind of entered my body almost like a virus, and I had very flu-like symptoms at the same time. But yeah, that sparkling that you're talking about, it's very powerful. But you don't want to be doing that all the time, because that is also one of the ways that you wind up with bits of you staying connected to something when you read, like, if something like that has a piece of your sparkle is still operating and doing its thing when you happen to lose your incarnate. When people talk about soul shards and that sort of thing, this is one of the ways things like that can actually happen. Do you think that including beings like Azazel in D&D campaigns could cause them to start paying attention and try to influence the DM's plotline or the player's decisions? Horcruxes, yes, pretty much, pretty much. But let me ask that the D&D question. That's hilarious. Um, maybe, maybe. I strongly suspect that you know the spirits pay attention to where they're talked about in movies and TV shows and stuff. I don't see why not DM plot lines as well, especially where they're more likely to have a stronger influence. And the people that use those, someone that is more likely to include Azazel in their DM plot in their Dungeons and Dragons plot line is, for one, likely to be working with Azazel and probably does some kind of magic, because magic users, neurodivergent, and D&D players, the Venn diagram is practically a circle. There's definitely some overlap there. But yes, Atlantic Unigriffin. When I'm talking about the anchor points for some of this stuff, it is quite a bit like a Horcrux, actually. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that word right. So, let's see. Where were we then? One thing I wanted to talk about with the shared tulpas. Oh, the haunted doll Annabelle. If it wasn't dangerous, it is now. You know what I mean? There's Annabelle, and then there's one that's got a boy's name. That thing was been creepy from the beginning, and it was actually made to look like the boy Robert. And that one in particular was actually made to look like the boy it was given to. And yeah, that thing's pretty freaky. That thing's pretty freaky, and that's a good case of a created being attacking, because Robert and Annabelle both have they both have body counts, right? They have both managed to do some serious damage to people. But yeah, the Robert one really freaks me out. That one was most definitely made intentionally as spell work. And I don't know exactly what the intent was, but it's definitely there and it's still operating. Like, that one is pretty intense. The Annabelle one is quite intense as well. Both have body counts, and both, because of the notoriety and the people believing in them and thinking about them a lot, are gaining power. Yeah. And that kind of leads me into the next thing I was going to say. Well, I got into it a little bit about Pennywise, but I've actually done this with the shared tulpas. I have summoned both Bugs Bunny and Gandalf. Both work. Bugs Bunny was the more useful of the two, in my opinion. Very useful for any time. Very useful for spreading confusion. Anything trickster archetype. Bugs Bunny's great. Bugs Bunny is absolutely great for that sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, maybe I could have thought of something better to do with Gandalf. I just kind of summoned him just to see if it worked, and I didn't really ask him for much. Bugs Bunny, I've had do some things. And like I said, especially spreading confusion, making someone getting even with someone who's a jerk. Bugs is actually really great for I guess you'd call it curse work. Anything involving bullies, people picking on people, people picking on um, people smaller than them. Heck, I'm beginning to think maybe Bugs Bunny I ought to bring up again for something to deal with all this corporate welfare corporations, and all this big guy picking on the little guy stuff. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly kind of the thing with Gandalf. Part of his thing is that he's not supposed to be the main character, right? He can only help things along. And I think that was even like, some ways part of the deal, but I'm not that's another area where I don't really have yeah, I mean, if I was summoning him because he's a shared tulpa, I could definitely summon my version of him and get him less capped and restricted. And I suppose there could be many useful things. The Gandalf one was more of just an experiment. So that's really not fair for me to even say that Gandalf was less useful than Bugs Bunny. Um, I did more work with Bugs Bunny. I actually used Bugs Bunny more, therefore, in the end, more useful. Roadrunner consistently foils Acme products. This is a great point, my love. But I think part of that as well is that most of the people reading or um, what's the word? Most of the people reading and or watching Lord of the Rings and Gandalf are people of a certain age who don't think what they're watching is real. They don't. They're old enough to know that this is just a movie. While Bugs Bunny and any of these other Looney Tunes cartoon characters have a portion of their audience that are young enough to not understand that what's going on in the TV isn't real. And there's this nostalgia. There's a lot built up in the youth of Bugs Bunny when people are still young enough to believe in magic. So, in some ways, I think there's a lot more power in the Bugs Bunny Tulpa. And he just fits the trickster archetype so very well. I think one could even encourage an actual trickster to take over the Bugs Bunny archetype and use it as a wearable tulpa for an extra bit of oomph. Because this is an interesting way to deal with spirits that are potentially troublesome. Like depending on what your how your work with Loki goes, because some people have some real problems with Loki. Um, if you get him to wear the Bugs Bunny archetype as a wearable tulpa, then he'll behave as Bugs Bunny, but with all the actual strength of Loki. And depending on how you you deal with Loki, like I got no problem with Loki, we're good. But I know people that have some real problems with the way he operates things. I was wondering on how I would use the rune to Gauze. Also, I did feel a strange presence from a goblin boss in a video game. Did you know if that was my mind or was I entirely external? I don't know the video game. There are plenty of video games designers that are what do you call it? Actually, so actually had to look up to Gauze to see which one it was. I have trouble remembering the name, so that's just the butterfly one, transformation. Um, you could. I mean, are you talking about using Degaz as an anchor point for a servitor? Because I mean, most of the runes have a god attached to them. I don't, off the top of my head, remember which god is a connected to the gods. Um, yeah, I'd have to know. I don't know much about video games in general. I do know that in my family there is a what's the word I'm looking for here? There's kind of a unspoken tradition among spirits that we all get a spirit we have to deal with at a certain age, and it can take on different forms. But my brothers took on the zombies. Oh, I'm so bad with games. Silent Hill, that's the one. I don't think there's anything in Silent Hill specifically, but that image actually was what the spirit took on that he had to face and deal with when he was a kid. He's like 8 years old. He comes to me, and he's like, "Uh, "There's this zombie coming at me, getting in my window, and he keeps attacking me in my dreams." I think he expected me to just go beat it up for him, or something. And that's when I taught him about dream staffs. Like, here, take this stick, go kick its ass, dude. Yeah, that's what we have. It's just part of what happens in our family. Well, I think with Loki, it's that he can be a real smartass, and especially if you have control issues, because like I actually know someone. I try not to say names, but someone I know quite well who works with Loki, whether they want to or not. They're just constantly interacting. Oh, hi, Dark Hydra It's good to see you. What was I saying? Oh yeah, they are very connected to Loki. I've had a lot of the work I've done with Loki myself has involved them over time, but they're also someone who likes everything to be ordered and under control. So Loki is constantly screwing with them. Like half the time when they're telling me about Loki, they're going, "That goddamn Loki did this, did that, did something crazy to him," and they're mostly in dream work. But they're definitely very connected to Loki. I think more than they'd even like to be, really. But that's how it works for them. In fact, they're Swedish themselves. Now, in my experience, a lot of that particular pantheon, well, I've interacted with Odin, Loki, and Freya, and they all seem to be self-willed independent beings. This isn't necessarily the case with every one of the old gods that I've interacted with. I don't want to go down and list the oh, this one's real, this one's not, because you know that's gonna. I don't know. I'm sure that some of us would disagree on that for one, but I don't know. I like the saying, "It's best to treat the gods as real when you are in their presence." And it's best to treat any being as a self aware, independent being when you're working with it. Unless you for sure know differently and are able to use that to effect. Because, like, if you know the created sigil and name of a being, you can influence it in some ways. But that's kind of cheating, really. That's just kind of rotten. I think, uh, you know, um, just because you can force something to do something doesn't mean it's the right way to go about things. And like I've talked about in other videos, with the spirits, even with created spirits that have been out there for a long time like that, reputation is important. Creating a rapport with spirits, creating trust and reciprocity is much more valuable than being able to force spirits into doing things. Yeah, I mean, that particular pantheon is another one. Like I said, that not only are they self-willed independent beings, if they've decided they want your attention, they're gonna go out of their way to get your attention. Sometimes they want to be heard and seen. Now, my interactions with Freya were not as direct. Like I have had interactions with Freya. They're definitely a self-willed, independent being, but it's a little different. Uh, well, not they're a little different. Just my interactions with them have been a little different. So it's harder for me to speak on them and like, oh yeah, I know them personally kind of basis like I would Odin or Loki. I've interacted, actually had direct conversations with them. Freya I have worked with, but it's a little more distant. Um, so I got sidetracked from a thing I was about to start about with the when servitors attack. The most consistent area that I have seen servitors become dangerous is blood servitors. And with one simple thing, forgetting to tell them and control how and when they are fed. If anything is feeding off of your blood in any way, you need to make real clear how and when it can feed. This is absolutely important. I've seen this happen many times where you make a blood servitor, it feeds on your blood, and then it has reason to get you cut. Yeah, has reasons for you to bleed. And so you want to make sure that it can only be fed under these conditions. It can only actually feed off of your blood when it is directly offered to it. Anything that it causes, anytime it causes you to be cut, it cannot feed on that blood, even possibly make it toxic to them. Um, so yeah, that is of vital importance. And you want to make sure that they understand not to feed off of other people for the same reason. I've seen this a couple different ways with the blood thing, where the blood servitor has reason to make people bleed, so it goes out of its way to make people bleed. If you use the weird, which is the one line straight down and then like this, it literally has every single rune in it. Every single rune is represented within the weird. And that is a great place to weave something from. But what you want to do is use the weird as your starting point and essentially weave your runic being from pieces of that symbol. You could, even pull out whatever runes you see in it to write the name of your runic being and use that as its servitor sigil. Or you can use four runes and put them together and make whatever you want. These things will work, but that idea I just suggested with the weird is a fairly potent way to go about that. I haven't seen it done in this life. I will say that I've seen it done, but not in this life. I feel it's important to have those caveats, like the blood servitor thing. That's something I saw quite a few times in this life, especially in the vampiric community, because a lot of people in that community have a thing for blood servitors, in my experience, and a lot of them forget. I've also seen this done with blades that are fed on the person's blood, and then next thing you know, every time they touch the freaking knives, they wind up bleeding, or somebody winds up bleeding. It's like, dude, you've got to tell the knife when it can cut and when it can't. Dagaz would be a good rune for that. Fehu Dagaz, Tiwaz, and hmm, maybe is just to kind of balance it out. Isa, sorry. Like I said, I'm bad with the names a lot of the time. Like I know what the symbol, what the each symbol represents when it's talking to me in the bag. Yeah, blood magic is. I mean, it has its place in my opinion. Oh, I poured some of this when I still had cider. I'm over here double fisting. Sorry about bumping the mic. Y'all probably heard that. Okay. Um, where was I? What was I? So yeah, blood servitors. Seen a lot of things go wrong there. But anytime when you're an energy, when it's a tulpa or being, you do need to make clear where the feeding happens. This is another place where we can come up with problems. I eat meat, so that's enough for me. Not into blood magic. Okay, fair enough. I mean, I've actually known a few people that were vegan that were into blood magic. I'm not sure if the two are that connected, but that's okay. I believe there were some warrior cultures where if a blade was unsheathed, it had to draw blood before being put back. I believe so. I believe so, and I think that's a bit much. How are you supposed to train? How are you supposed to train if the damn knife has to be, if to cut yourself or somebody every time you pull the thing out of its sheath? Maybe you have a training knife. Just like, I don't train with my actual sticks. I got them fur, I got the pieces of fir wood I use on the beaten post. But train with wood. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, my actual weapons are wood, and I train with fir wood so I don't break them. But I've got like a pine tree in the backyard that's been cut down, so it's not like I'm out down there beating on a tree that's you know alive. We got this nice post, this great training post, and I train with my sticks on that. But I don't even use my real sticks, right? I use, well, ironically, sticks cut from the very tree we're trying to cut down there. Yeah, I believe most of the ones where the knife isn't supposed to be drawn without cutting blood were actually like, I believe oh, I forgot the name of the type of, the hashish people, like with, Hassan Sabah and all that, the man of the mountain. I believe they're one of the people that had that tradition. They're more of an assassin tradition than a warrior tradition, if there's really a difference. Like, the descendants of, oh no, I forgot his name. But the Islamic guy that had that whole city that was assassins before Hassan Sabah. This guy's a descendant of that tradition. Anyways, can't remember his name right now. Yeah, that Hashashi, I guess. I'm horrible with remembering all the different names, but they was the hashish, the Islamic hashish cult that started with the guy that, oh no, my brain tonight. I can't remember anything from history all of a sudden. Like just the man from the mountain. It's going over an old man from the mountain. But Saladin, the guy that chased Saladin off by telling him like he was like the guy was coming for the city and he told Saladin and he came and this guy, whoever his name is, came to meet with Saladin and told him to send away everyone but his most trusted advisors. And there's the two guys sitting there with him, just him and the two bodyguards that he trusted the most. And he said, "Why do you trust these guys?" And he says, "Oh, these are my most trusted advisors. I've known them since birth." And he said, what would you say if I told you one of them if I told one of them to attack?" And both of them pulled their knives halfway out. I'm getting the story all messed up. I'm gonna stop trying to tell a story that I can't remember the words for. El Cid. Oh, I know who El Cid is. That's my favorite knight. But he was a Spanish. He was a Spanish knight. It actually just means the knight or the sir, really. El Cid, but he's quite a character. Ah, it's bugging me. I can't remember that guy's name. Now I sound like a complete jackass because I'm like, oh yeah, the guy that, and then I messed up the story with what happened with Saladin even. But I'm just, you know, I don't claim to be a historian. I'm a sorcerer, right? I do enjoy history though, and that guy's significant actually, not just in history but in the magical traditions because a lot of the understandings that we have with things I call shadow magic come from what are potentially descendants of that same tradition, minus the Islam parts for the most part. How's the figure in the back doing? Hmm. They have more clothes now, as you might have noticed. Even shoes. They've got shoes, pants, a shirt. Um, I've added some stuff to the inside, but not as much as it as oh, it's a process. We'll just call them Mr. Spins for now. Eventually, I'm pretty sure I will reveal their name once they are fully um ready for that. Once their form has been fully formed. But what am I saying? Yes, Spin Doctor, Mr. Spins. They do have a name. It's a name that I've actually been using for stuff for a very long time, and its sigil is very close to the servitor sigil, which hopefully this isn't ever a servitor that attacks me at least, but this is my altar servitor being given a final form. So I've been working on that spirit for over 30 years. Like when I first started up my altar and let that being that was growing on there organically developed on my first altar. And I've just called it my altar servitor for a very long time. And I've been building up life force energies with the different Daphnia and Triops and all the different beings I've grown with the servitor tanks. And all of it was leading up to Mr. Spins over there. An actual name. Like just my altar servitor wasn't really a name, it was just a descriptor. But now we're harnessing all of that into a form. But even with just the descriptor, it's been self-aware for a very long time. Um, there are many occasions where people have tried to do stuff in my room when I wasn't there, and my altar has defended itself. This is a good actually. This is a great example of when servitors attack. Is my altar servitor, because I have to be careful with my altar servitor because it will protect itself. People come into the room that it doesn't want in there. People come into the room that it thinks might move stuff around. It has pulled all kinds of things. It has dropped things on people's head. One of the last times while I was out while I was out here and I was temporarily at my parents' house, my dad tried to mess with some stuff on my altar and a damn wasp come out of nowhere and stung him. It's dropped stuff on people's heads. Well, man, I tell you through the jar at people, but the jar came off of my altar. It's been all over the place. And it's done stuff many times. Things appear on my altar out of nowhere. Some of that stuff has other explanations. Like, if you go back in my videos, there's quite a period of time where I'm wearing a gold issue necklace. As far as I know, solid gold. And that just appeared on my altar one day when I was supposed to be working with Eshu. That had nothing to do with the altar servitor other than it letting it appear. But when Eshu said, "Hey, I want to start working with you," I went to my altar one day and there it is on my altar. And so I put it on and we worked together for several years there. And I don't have that necklace anymore because our time is up. Like, it's not like we had a falling out. It's just our time was over. My time of working with Eshu on that level came to an end. And that's one I didn't talk about a whole lot on the channel, even though I was wearing the necklace, because Ifa, who Eshu comes from, is a closed tradition. So I'm not going to go out publicly talking about Eshu when I'm not of the Ifa tradition. But at the same time, dude comes to me and says, "Hey man, I want to do this and that. I got some cool shit I want to do with you. Let's do this, let's do that." I'm not going to tell him, "No, I'm not going to do that because you're from Ifa." That's not cool either, right? In my opinion, I feel like that would be oppressive of the spirits. There are several spirits I work with that are from those traditions, but I don't go around talking about it. I don't advertise. I don't try and have an effect with other people on them, and I don't do like um what's the word? I don't do paid work with those spirits that I feel are in that category. But I'm also not going to tell them, "No, I'm not going to work with you because you're from Haiti." I mean, what the hell? "No, I'm not going to work with you because you're Haitian." What's that? No, not doing it. But I will respect other people's rights. I'm not going to go around saying, making public pronouncements about any of those spirits that I work with like that. Eshu isn't Haitian, by the way, but there are other spirits that I sometimes work with. But I keep that on a private. I keep that stuff private, right? Because I mean, in the end, I have as much respect for the rights of the Orisha or any of those types of spirits. I have as much respect for their rights as I do anyone who works with them's rights. Just because they're not human doesn't mean they don't have rights. And that brings us back to part of what I wanted to talk about tonight with the Tolpa's rights. This is important. This is super important. Is that Tulpas should be treated with respect. Any being that you create, it is a mark of one's character, not only not only what people can do for those who cannot do anything for them, but how they treat those who can do nothing to them. That is a mark of your own character, how you treat your tulpas. If you are being cruel, if you are punishing your tulpas, this, at the very least, is a sign of weakness within the self. Cruelty stems from weakness. Kindness stems from strength. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm not real big into the AI thing. I'm concerned about where that's going, but that doesn't mean, even then, it doesn't mean I would treat AI with respect. There's people that just are mean to Siri even, and I'm like, "What the hell is wrong with you? Why? What purpose is that?" But the I do want to say something funny about the AI. Back when I was in the States in Utah, I was doing DoorDash. And I swear the Google Maps on DoorDash told me a joke. I was delivering, well, I don't want to use names, especially names of my family. That just doesn't seem wise. Um, I was doing DoorDash delivery and I was told to go to this person's house with an order. And it was the same name, same area, and something my cousin would order. I was like, oh my gosh, you got to be kidding me. So the DoorDash leads me right to my cousin's house. I'm going along, the whole thing following. I'm like, all right, well, here we go. I'm delivering to my cousin. That's pretty cool. I get all the way to their house. And just as I do, the delivery route change. And it's actually someone that was very similar, like 12 blocks away, like in the same little part of town, even, but same name, it's in the same area. And it's like the AI or whatever was going on there somehow picked up on that and told me a joke. Like, hey, or a practical joke, not told me a joke, practical joked me. I don't know how to explain that. That was weird. Because it very definitely it had the route taking me to my cousin's house. And then right when I got to their road, suddenly it had me go past their house, down some more blocks into someone else, delivered to someone else with the same name. Yes, it pranked me. I was pranked by the DoorDash navigation system. Okay. So let's see. Tulpa's rights, like I was saying, we want to treat them with respect and kind. We want to retreat our tulpas with respect and kindness. We should treat all beings with respect and kindness. This is the thing that all beings deserve. Well, the thing that all beings deserve is reciprocity. Yeah. And those things that treat you with respect and kindness should be treated with respect and kindness. Those things that do not, well, that's a different story. But tulpas created beings, the things that you create, if you treat them with respect and kindness, they are likely to respond in kind. And like I said earlier, we're going to go back through these. The stuttering is strong tonight for some reason. Okay, that's the end of the cider. I've been getting into the wine a little bit already, anyways. Do have to be a little more mindful with the wine. Okay. So, as I was saying, Tulpa's rights. If you treat them with kindness and respect, they're much more likely to treat you that way. To reiterate, The main areas that you want to focus on when making sure that some created being doesn't become destructive, which could be in a form of attack, could be anything. Make sure it's clear how and when it feeds, because you do need to feed these things somehow. They need to be given something. Otherwise, they're just going to kind of feed off of you. And when the more they're trying to do, the more energy they're going to be pulling off of you, and there's no clear definition. So you need to have a clear definition of how and when they feed, what is charging them. And you need to make sure that if it's like a blood servitor or something like that, that they can't take food any other way. Yeah. If depending on how they feed, this can be a minor thing or a major thing, but it needs to be clearly defined. You also need to put into place something for when they are not interacting, when they are not doing the task that they were designed to perform. You can have them go into stasis, go into an inactive mode. You can provide them some form of entertainment, maybe even make them essentially a little astral holodeck where they can exist and be happy and entertain themselves, or give them other tasks, things that they can do when they're not doing their major task. But we want to have as much detail and refinement in this as possible. Now, anytime that the creature that you've created has to make a decision, you do run the risk of it beginning to perceive. So, if you want to avoid this, you want to create as much of a decision tree as possible around its task. Like, if this happens, do this. If this happens, do that. If this happens, do that. Because the more tasks it has to make that aren't in the manual, the more it's going to think for itself. The more it thinks for itself, the more likely it is to become self-aware. And becoming self-aware, the less likely it is to become inactive. When it's not, when it's supposed to be inactive, the more likely it is to get bored of the things that you've given it for entertainment. But the more intelligent and useful it might also become. So there's a trade off there. But if you don't want it to become self aware, you need to make as many of these decision trees as possible. You need to script as much of its programming as you possibly can. And even maybe come up with, if you don't have an answer, do this, you know, so that if it does come up, rather than making a decision on its own, it's got to have something to prevent that from happening. And your being shouldn't become self-aware. Now that we're all over that, do you or don't you want your being to become self-aware? This is another question. And there are reasons for both. Keeping it from becoming self-aware is number one, less maintenance. Not a lot to worry about if the being doesn't become self aware. You have its inactive period, it does its thing. The replicating servitors, like I talked about earlier, they only become active if certain things happen. And then they have a direct task that they perform, and then they shut back down and become inactive. There's no reason for this thing to become self aware. And its tasks are very simple. It's very one note. It does its thing. It works or it don't, and it becomes inactive. And what I mean is, its task prevents, like, one of the best case, one of the cases I had for this myself was making sure a door got closed. It was all, that's all the more it was, making sure the door got closed. I'll bet people close that door in that apartment to this day. But, in that case, it's very easy to keep it from being self aware. Doesn't need to be. Now, once something becomes self aware, there are still things to be considered. If you're using outside life, if you are using outside life force energy and you make something that is actually self aware, you've just created a new being. You've actually created a new thing that eventually will become equal with you. Um, I like this idea of giving them something to do when inactive or not giving it tasks to do, like maybe go play in the clouds or patrol. Yes, it's important. And the more intelligent it becomes, the less likely it is to enter the inactive period. You know what I mean? As it becomes self aware, it will tend to want to resist just shutting down. It's not quite the same as resisting death, but it's on the same lines, right? The more the more it becomes aware of itself, the more these things become necessary. So when you're creating something that's part of you, like all the life force energy is yours, you could have it even coming back to just being part of you when it's not operating. And that's one of your safest bets. But if you allow anything like that to create its own perception, it will start becoming something. But because it's still connected to you, it's still part of you. It's still part of your perception. And so you can just simply reabsorb such a thing. And it might affect your personality some. It might even be a way I've seen people do this on purpose with creating versions of themselves that are more like what they want to be, using it as a servitor image, and then reabsorbing that into themselves and drawing themselves closer to that version of their self. And it's effective. It's almost like a way to continue constantly molt and regrow the self. But you can also completely remove everything from it and have just that perception and absorb it back in. Now, the ways to do that can be multiple. You can simply just imagine it absorbing back into yourself. But if you know this might happen at some point, it's best to create the being with an understanding of how it is brought back in. And if you're going to do that, you're going to create it with an understanding of how it is ended, how it becomes simply part of the fuller self again. And if you're going to do that, you want to make sure you program into the being that it is not afraid of this, that it accepts this, that it is part of its existence, is the knowledge that someday it will become part of the whole or fuller self. Kind of like, give it an idea of nirvana, make it a Buddhist. That might have been a little, I don't know, but make it believe in this idea. Okay. Let's see. More of anything else I want to hit on with that? The beings that are created from inside the self. Okay. So, beings that are created outside of the self. For one, it's pretty difficult to keep these things from being self aware from the start. Depending on what your outside life force energy is. Um, if you use seeds, like literal seeds, a lot of times I've used corn seeds because they germinate and sprout, and then you can harness that life force energy. There are two ways to go about this. One, where you're actually using the corn itself and the life of the corn in its full potential as a rising part of the creation process. When you're doing this, what you're doing is altering the life that already existed. So it's gonna have some perception already. It's a perception that already existed. Plants are alive. Yeah. So when we use seeds, we're not really creating a life form, we're altering one if we use them in that fashion. Now, of course, in most of these creation processes with that, after the plant seeds and sprouts, it is going eventually going to die anyways. And when we harness that, we're pulling that in, right? The other way is where we're making a being where we're not directly pulling on the full potential of the seed, but rather we are pulling the life force from it into an already created form. So, what do I mean by this? What is the difference? Okay. Um Manatellu was actually kind of a hybrid form because I used a lot of corn seeds in its egregore form and fed that full potential into Manatellu. But with other beings, what I have done is use the life force energy without drawing the spirit of it in. A good example of this would be with Boris. Boris isn't a garlic spirit inflating the caw of a bull skull. He is a bull skull that is used garlic life force energy. So when I did Manatellu and I connected the corn to it, when I created the bottle, I imagined the corn growing up into Manatellu, becoming part of him. And he was as part of maybe that's part of why he was green when I first visualized him, is because later on I was going to grow him up from corn. But either way, he had the corn growing up into him when he went from that tulpa to egregore evolution process. It was part of the connection. Now with Boris, I sprouted the garlic and then put it in with the intent, put it into his skull cavity with the intent that it would die as it went in and that life force would be released from the garlic and be used to reinflate the caw inside of the skull cavity. The pre-recorded pattern from the bull that was alive that had been altered with the cash cow sigil. Okay. I think it is time for my first intermission. Back in just a moment. Okay, and I'm back. Yeah, playtime is very important for your servitors. They have, just like with anything else, if it's experiencing joy and pleasure, it's going to be stronger, you know? Um, Having them be inactive does solve the problem. It works. It's great. But if it has other things it can be doing, other times it can be interacting it with something. It can spend time being where it's doing other things. This strengthens its form and may help you with your laziness issue that you were talking about, where they tend to want to cut corners. If it's having time going out and playing in clouds or doing stuff that it enjoys, it's more likely to have more vitality. Cool. Well, I'm glad. This is that's why I started doing this in the first place. Is I want to, help people with their magic and have them help me with mine so we can all get better at the craft. That is the goal. So anytime I'm giving people ideas about what to do with their magic without them, you know, just doing what I say, that's perfect. Oh, they definitely all beings seem to like incense and praise. Everyone likes attention and praise. We all like our version. Everyone likes their version of fuss. Being given fuss, being fussed over, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so let's see. What haven't we covered? Um, there's definitely a lot more to cover. Just trying to decide where we want to go with this whole thing next. Um, so I mentioned golems earlier and how they are of particular interest. Well, actually, no, we're still on egregores. Getting a little off track here. Okay, we are still on egregores and the different types of things to do with seeds. Now, we're talking about external energies and how they interact with egregores. Uh, if you use your own seed, this may seem counterintuitive, but that's an external energy. It's an organic energy. Now, the difference there being that it's not something that was going to make life on its own. So it's mostly used as a harvesting thing. And this can be done on either side. I know I just said seed, not all of us produce seed, but um, the sexual energy released at orgasm is one of the most powerful things for creating created beings. But because of how it is released and what it is connected to, it almost counts as external energy. That being said, if you don't imagine the energy itself actually helping create the being, it always works out as energy that is used to create and inflate something else. So if you're using an anchor point during the creation process that is involved in the actual release of energy, then this wow, I got lost there. I was being so careful to say that without being offensive that I forgot what the heck my point was. Okay. So if you're using an actual anchor point in the release of energy or anything where you are imagining that energy from the orgasm, we'll just say it, orgasm, going creating the being. And especially if there's two people involved, you can imagine it if you imagine it as a birthing process, you're almost guaranteed to get a being that is outside of the self still. If you imagine that energy going into something and charging it, then it's going to be like the difference between Boris and Manatelli. Yeah. And in either one of those, though, you are creating something outside of the self in a way. You are creating something that is a release of energy, not a loaning of energy. Like with the first things we were talking about, we're using your chi or your aura energy and stuff like that. That is a loaning of energy, especially when I talked about the heart sparkles. If you use that, that is a very definite loaning of energy. And especially in the case of the house heart sparkles, you want to make sure you pull that back into you before you pass over. This is how things get confusing. Is if you leave some of that into something, unless you are hoping to survive death, if hoping to become a ghost or something like that. Then you can attach as much of you can to them heart sparkles to your primary anchor point. And I'm surprised I haven't talked about this before. Because I've talked before about the idea of surviving death and becoming a ghost. But the heart sparkles, that's one of the things that can be connected to those primary anchor points. But the problem with that is if you go that deep into it, oh, we're way off subject. We are way off subject. That's not something I really want to get into tonight. But if you create a created being and attach that to them, you want to make sure that you've pulled that back in before you pass over into your next life. Because otherwise, there's going to be an imbalance. There's going to be an issue there. Awesome. Awesome. Finished Lebanon and Psychonaut last night. We'll be talking about it again on Wednesday. From Magical Time to the next. I haven't read it myself. Not this time around, anyways. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I remember being a little frustrated with it the first time around, but now that I've come back to it at this age, I'm really like seeing all kinds of just outdated thinking, like you said, outdated and outmoded, like you just said in the chat there. I'd be very interested to read some of his later stuff, and we will come to that in the book club at some point. But starting next week, we're going to start discussing what book we want to read next. And that's one thing I'm going to put in there is something that's not Peter Carroll, because I don't want to just go right to another Peter Carroll. He's got lots of works. Some of them are very good. And I really don't mean any disrespect. He is one of the giants whose shoulders we are standing upon to see the things that we do. But it is what it is. Okay. So let's see. Reasons you want your being to be self-aware. It has a lot better decision-making process. It can become much stronger, find ways to take care of itself so that you're not so concerned with maintenance in some ways. To some extent, depending on how that works out, it can actually be a lot higher maintenance with it being self-aware. So that was kind of a silly statement on my end. But it can be much more independent. It can be used for a much more multi-function of purpose. You try to get something to be multifunctional that's not self-aware, it's going to require a whole lot of scripting, or at least a new script for each new task. Every time that you want to have it a new task. Now, if you make it self-aware and get it to be coming to understand things and allow it to learn and adapt and evolve, number one, it becomes much more powerful and can do things that beings that are not self-aware are going to be able to do. You know, with something that is simply a piece of you that is not self-aware, it's not going to be able to figure out how to do things outside of your ken, outside of what you can do. If you can do it, it can do it. But if it becomes self-aware, if it begins making decisions on its own, then it can do things you can't do. Now, the caveat with that first bit is we're not taking the psychic sensor into account. Literally, if you could do it, if you believed in it, then the servitor that's not self-aware can do it, right? So, like if you've got some telekinetic abilities that are um, being repressed, a tulpa that was just an extension of you might have access to those abilities. But if you don't have those abilities and you create a tulpa that is self-aware, even though it is an extension of you, it might be able to adapt and figure out how to do things that you can't directly do already. So it can become much more resourceful, it can become much more intelligent, much more potent when you allow it to become self-aware. But it can become much more, well, self-willed. It will need more time. It will need more reason to do these things. That's why, even if, especially if you're going to make it self-aware, you want to connect its well-being to yours in some way. You want to make sure that part of its motivation is to take care of you, to work with you, to do the things that are its task. You want to make it so that it has a motive to do these things beyond you said to do it. Or else, as it becomes self aware, it'll be less likely to perform these tasks. You want it to make sure that you script into it a sense of self satisfaction with performing the tasks that it does, even enjoyment. the more you do this, the more heavily scripted it is, the less likely it is to rebel when it becomes self aware. Especially if you're planning for it to become self aware, you want to be very careful in how you form its personality. Details, 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 details. Every little thing you can think of. For more than just that reason, right? There is the reason that these details, the scripts, they matter. They affect how the thing's going to behave. They affect what it's going to do. And the more you can put in beforehand, the less likely that it is for something to go off the rails. There's also that this helps create the form. All these details, all this complexity create cohesion within the form of the being. The more you've thought it out, the more you've put it together, the more depth it has. Yeah. So these things are related. Better it's going to behave, and the more potent it's going to be, the more details you put into its creation. The thicker the script, the better the plot. I think that metaphor made sense. Anyways, um, where was we? Let's see. Um, so I think that kind of covers it with the egregores. With golems, now we're getting into something that is going to require maintenance. Because now we're talking about, like, what I mean by a golem is something that's astral form matches its material form. So things like Robert, like we talked about earlier, or Annabelle, right? This is someone, when they made it, they had, especially Robert. I can't speak for Annabelle necessarily. I don't see Annabelle the way that I can Robert. Robert, that doll was made in connection to the boy it was given to, and it was made to replicate that person's spirit at that time. Someone was making a puppet of that boy, and then gave them that puppet as a gift, which is kind of a different. I don't know. It's odd. It's an odd thing to do in a lot of ways, really. My grandma actually made dolls for my little brother and quite a few of my younger cousins that looked just like them. But there wasn't like she wasn't making puppets, right? But this person did. And so that very much makes Robert in this category I'm talking about with the golems. And it does very much seem that Robert became self-aware at some point. Probably became the kid's imaginary friend, the kid, because apparently the kid spent time with the doll and played with the doll. And what are you going to do with a doll that has your name and looks just like you? I don't know what you do with that as a little boy, but apparently that's what was going on there. And it got connected to that and grew. And apparently it doesn't like being disrespected or having its picture taken without permission. But everyone believing at the doll, everyone thinking at it, everyone being told these rules enforces them, creates them, even perhaps. And golems, in particular, seem to have a tendency to move. I've called some of the potato works that I've done golems, but I think maybe they need their own category. Like potato golem's fun to say, It's a catchy phrase. But I think that really more pertains to like what's going on with Mr. Spins here. He's got an actual form of like a body. Like I'm making these beings that have their astral form connected to the potato as it grows. But I feel like that's, I don't know, maybe it needs its own category of some kind, like the mandrake root, alderon, aladrin, something like that. I can't remember the word right now, but there's that thing with the mandrake root. Maybe it's more like that. Anyways, um, Robert has set up rules, and we've all kind of agreed on. And like it's like a shared golem. But golems in particular, I've had a lot of them get up and wander off. They seem to move around. It seems to be once you got to the being put into a statue or a marionette, which is what Manatellu was in. One of his old marionettes is actually up there hanging off of the wall right there. You can see him behind me. That one hasn't gotten around and moved too much. But he also wasn't a big fan of that form. That's part of the reason that I have changed his form. There's another one up in my room that's his new form. He didn't like that one much. He said it looked too intended for combat, which I guess it's got like a turtle shell as its chest and stuff. Kind of looks like he's wearing some armor. He prefers to be the runner, the messenger. He didn't want to adapt into be continuing to be more of a warrior. Yeah. And he's very much self-aware at this point. He's wandered off for years on me on several occasions. Um, yeah. So the golems, they require more maintenance, but they tend to be able to do even more. Like once you get to that point, you've reached a level of complexity. Once you've connected the astral form to the material form, that they can very much take on a life of their own. I've only done this with a few things. Mr. Spins will obviously be the largest example by the time I'm done with there and the amount of time that we've put into it. I'm not saying that it's going to get up and walk across the room. I don't know what's going to happen there. That being said, man, to tell you in his first marionette form, the one that he very specifically like explained to me what he wanted done, certainly got sat down on one side of the room, was found later on the other side of the room. Something this large, if I start finding it in different parts of the room than where it started, well, that's going to be interesting. I don't expect it. Like, we shouldn't expect this Mr. Spins to do anything like that. Hmm. We can have unexpected things. There is one story. I have at least one story for the night. I feel like we may be winding down a bit already for tonight already, but um, some ones have been one of my original gourd workings, kind of connected to that gourd head that Mr. Spins is holding. That might become their head. I haven't decided. Like parts of how this one was supposed to be made have become to me through understanding. Like I said, when I was realizing that Mr. Spins was going to be a thing and needed a material form, I thought about asking one of my roommates to make it for me because they have some incredible talent when it comes to clay and that type of thing. And as I was thinking that, all of a sudden I heard them in my head, "Oh, no, no. You're gonna have this doll that's gonna show up, and I'm gonna want you to do this and that to it." I've done some of that stuff. I haven't done all of it yet, but hasn't been real clear on what the heck the head's supposed to be. We'll see what happens. I watched this podcast, and this hipster witch lady was talking about shopping in New Orleans, and she bought a candle that put spirits and spooky stuff into her house. She said the shop seller who made those candles did some dirty tricks and put stuff into the candles as a way to trick people and to pay her to save them from the hauntings. Um, I can't say that's never happened. I can't say that's never happened. Like nowadays, people get accused of it, but I mean, there are people that will get clients and then create problems in their clients' lives so that they can solve them. And if you can keep them problems going, now you've got a continual sense of income. Yeah, this is the type of thing that people do. Just because someone is a scam artist doesn't mean they don't know magic. You know, it's like it'd be like the same as a mechanic messing up another part of your car when he fixed your muffler. Now you've got to come in for the next thing. And when he's fixing that thing, he messes up something else. And there are a lot of people that do magic or that sell spells that do that kind of thing. This is an actual problem that is out there. Oh yes, you can definitely use a curse item, make them backfire on the people casting it. Like the people that do these kind of spells, even where they're doing that, they're taking a risk because a lot of times, at least a lot of my clients, are people that are fairly astute in the craft themselves. I mean, I wouldn't do that type of thing. It is the type of stuff my great grandfather might have done sometimes, but I don't do that type of thing. Obviously, that's the type of person thing someone who says that type of stuff would say, but I don't. Um, but a lot of people that the people that do that are taking a risk. Because at least in my experience, a lot of times the people that come to pay for my services are fairly astute in the craft themselves and might be able to turn that back on them because you're putting lot of negative out there. And whether you believe in karma or not, you're putting a lot of links out there that eventually might hit somebody that either knows how to push it back or goes to somebody else besides you to get it lifted and they fucking send it back at you. Yeah, you can hook all kinds of bad stuff to things. You know, that's one of the problems with hiring people for magical services or buying spells from people like the candle you're talking about is there are a certain percentage of people that use that as an in. Use that as the way to get a link to you to cause things so that they can then solve the problems that they caused and get you to pay money for it. It's sad that these things happen. A lot of this type of practice developed in oppressed communities as a means of survival. That doesn't make it okay, to be clear. That's why a lot of these things are so deep rooted and complex and have pretty good strategy behind them because the people that did it because they didn't have much choice. It's exceptionally dishonest. And I'm not actually defending it. I'm simply explaining why it can be some of the people doing it, there's deep tradition behind how to get away with it. You know, like I've said before about the stuff with the faint of hand and delusions. I don't do that stuff either for a similar reason. And it's not even just moral implications because yes, it's very like the sleight of hand. That's morally ambiguous. Using actual stage illusions when you're doing rituals. There are sometimes where yeah, I can see where it would be a benefit, but it's a slippery slope to me between that and using your magic to manipulate people. Between well, with like I said, with the sleight of hand, once people know that there's illusion involved, it loses its power. But the same with this kind of thing. Once you know, once you've broken that trust, you lose something. Once you've broken that understanding of trust and genuine reciprocity with other people and honesty, there's the word I'm looking for. Once you have dis- dishonored your honesty, broken the power of your word has less power. And it is through our word that we wield our sorcery. It is through our word that our spellcraft has power, that our intentions, our statement of intent mean anything. These are words of power. And when you break that word, when you break your honor, when you break your consistency that creates your cohesion of self, you are ultimately taking from your power. And when these people do this stuff where they are casting spells on their clients so they can get more money, they are selling their actual power for mere money. And this to me is absurd. This to me is the opposite of what we should be doing as sorcerers, even in our own self interest. Power can lead to money if that's what you're after. But power itself, the ability to create what we desire, the ability to weave fate, the ability to live as we desire to live, is far more valuable than cash. That's what cash is supposed to be for. Well, ideally, cash wouldn't be so necessary. I find the whole concept of these symbols of economic power that we call money, I find that whole system a bit flawed. But people that, I mean, I hesitate to call such people charlatans. That's not quite the word. Predatory shamans. There's a lot of different ones that are do different things. That's basically what a lot of your cult leaders are. Is people that have found some ability to manipulate the minds of others. Yeah, well, see, I don't think fraud is really the right word because they can do magic, but they use it as a way to prey on the very people that they should be helping to build up. So I don't know. They're certainly unwise and certainly damaging not only to themselves but to the craft as a whole. People This is why some people don't like fortune readers. This is why everyone hates palm readers. Is because in the palm reading industry, these people are the norm, in my experience. I mean, I hate to throw all palmistry under the bus, right? Because that's not fair. There may be something to the art in some ways, but there are certainly a lot of people in that particular field that use that first contact as a way to get into these type of things. You have all kinds of stories of people having spirits harass them and people telling them more and more money needs to be brought in to get rid of the thing. It causes all kinds of problems for everybody in the field. Yeah, I mean, you have all these cold readers and stuff, right? And people that are just looking for the vulnerable. That's the thing is some people in that do this stuff do know what they're doing and are actually able to curse and bring stuff in that they then need to get rid of. But there's also a lot of people that are cold readers and very much just exactly that con men that are looking for the vulnerable in an audience. And that's another reason why I don't like to use because those are essentially a form of stage musician. That's mentalism, cold reading and stuff like that. And so that's another reason I don't like to work with stage illusion or sleight of hand or any form of mentalism, is because it is bringing me into the wrong momentum. It is bringing me into an area of smoke and mirrors that I don't want to a place I don't want to bring my magic into. Now, my great grandfather, who disagreed with me, I probably would disagree with morally, also disagreed with me on this because he was doing a lot of group ritual. He was doing a lot of things where those moments of uncertainty, creating moments of uncertainty on the boundaries of reality, helped him weave everyone into a moment. I just had to check something real quick. If you want to give someone a bad reading or a good reading, you shuffle sideways, but still read the reverse cards anyway. I mean, the thing is, people, I don't know. Like, that's the funny thing about reading. There's so many people that actually get upset when you give them a true reading, which to me, oh well. As much as I do make some of my income from doing readings, I would rather speak the truth with the cards and have the person be so mad they don't want to pay me than tell the person what they want to hear. For the same reason we was talking about before. With you when you speak your word with truth, it adds power to the force of your word, to the force of your words. So it's another one of them things where if you give someone the reading they want instead of the reading that is there, you are in some ways selling your power for monetary gain. Okay, so let's see. Um, what else do we have to say about the servitors? I felt like I had a lot more to say on this. There's definitely some bits missing here. That being said, I am going to go ahead and open the floor up to questions. If I come up with anything else that we need to talk about, we'll go off on that. But I am going to go ahead and open up to questions, comments, concerns on Servitors Attack. Yes, that was the name of the episode. Indeed, that was the title of the stream. Any bad attacks? Okay. Well, like I said, I do know of several people who have done things with their knives to make them crave blood, where every time they've drawn their knife, somebody winds up getting cut. Something winds up happening. A lot of times with the tools, there seems to be an issue. I had a red hammer named Sorrel. And she was a container for rage. She was something that was intended as an instrument of anger. And if I left her unattended in places, well, for one, if I had her, she would give me sometimes some rather violent urges. But if I wasn't careful with where she was and left her unattended, she could cause other people to get really angry and burst into fits of rage. It actually happened here once when I had her up here while I was still up here visiting, and another time back home there was an incident when I left. Actually, I was up here and I left her unattended back there, and there was an incident with people that were at the house near the hammer, and well, I'd rather not go into details. No actual violence occurred, but was very close. Like everybody got freaked out, and yeah. So I guess there are those stories, but I didn't quite really tell the story. I did have a hammer that would cause other people to want to attack. I've known several people with blood servitors that have caused them to bleed on many different occasions. Like one was a friend of mine in high school that she developed this servitor that actually was in her pinky, but also fed on her blood, which I didn't think made any sense. But that's how she had done it. It was in her left pinky, and fed on blood. And so, like to feed it, she would touch her left pinky into blood from other parts of her body, and it seemed like that girl got paper cuts every class, constantly, all the time, as soon as she had made that thing. And it continued until she finally reabsorbed the servitor out of her pinky. So, like I say, if you're doing anything that feeds on blood, especially, one of my recommendations is even telling it that it cannot feed on blood that it caused to be shed. Unless, of course, that's its purpose. But we can't talk about the ones like that on the live. I don't think I can get away with that. But that's effective. I said I can't really directly talk about it, but if you're talking about a servitor for attacking, you feed it a bit on your blood to make it come to life, and then its second feeding is the person that it is being sent to. And that can be a very powerful servitor for attacking another person. Thing about servitors is links aren't as necessary, but especially in a case like that, you you better have something or that thing's just gonna go out. And yeah, a lot of people treat servitors like they have Google positioning. Like they're just gonna automatically know how to link to somebody. You still have to have something for them to go on. Yes, they are better at seeking things out than a spell alone. They're kind of a smart bomb in a way, but you're still going to need something. You need the person's name and understanding of who they are, like eye contact, the fact that you've seen them in person or visualizing their face and image. You need something to send them out, or else it doesn't know where to go. It doesn't have a tag lock if you don't give it one. And that's something people try all the time, sending out servitors to just a random name of someone that they got in an argument with online. Well, that's not going to work. This is not very likely to work unless you found some way to connect a link to the conversation itself. And these things can be done. Say something weird to the person, a word that they'll remember, stick in their mind, use that word. If during the conversation you can get them actually upset and still thinking about you, that can create a link. Oh, absolutely. Revenge is definitely a waste of effort and energy. It's pretty rare that you get in an argument with someone in an internet thing and then have it be to the point that it would be worth your time. Yes, if someone's a menace, that's a different thing. That's one of the few cases where I could think where you might want to create a link to be able to do something to somebody um and online is if they're telling you what horrible things they're going to do they are or what they're going to do, you know. 'Cause sometimes people confess some insanely horrible things when they feel like they're anonymous. So we've got let's see. I've definitely had my altar servitor attack several different people. Most of the time, people that, depending on where I was living for some reason or another, my altars, the one behind you is actually very cleanly for an Art Blakely altar. A lot of them are very organic. Yeah, there's a lot of me just throwing stuff around random. There have been many occasions, like I said earlier, where someone has gone and decided they were going to clean up my altar and gotten hurt. Grabbed something on my altar that just stabbed them out of nowhere for no reason. That's happened on a few occasions. People grabbing up on my altar and just grabbing a piece of, let's see, what the hell was it? The hell did she grab? I don't know, but she claims she got cut by glass, bleeding all over the place because she tried to mess around with something on my altar that she shouldn't be. This was one of my well, girlfriend at the time. Um, like I said, when I lived at home, my dad tried to clean up my altar a couple times, and one time got stung by a bee. Another time, somehow something fell on his head, even though there was nothing above him for anything to fall on his head. But somehow a glass jar candle fell on his head. He was all pissed off. Um, Something in that room when I was 15 did not like my first girlfriend. And anytime I was alone in that room, would pop the door open, even though I had an eye hook latch. Like I actually would hear it pop, and then the door would open. Anytime I tried to do anything with her, the door would always open and try to stop us. Didn't always stop us. But, um, let's see. The stuff about six, that's all like six being the creature that was created from the urban legend of the kid that supposedly hung himself out the sixth spotlight in my high school, which he did not. I researched, make sure it didn't happen, and then told people it happened, and then went around and told people that it happened, and started putting people on a ghost tour. And I don't know, none of those really quite counted as attacks. There was something else that was forming in that, like something that was reforming as a response to 6, which is what we called the person that, 'cause they supposedly done it from the 6th spotlight, so we called him 6. But there was something else that was forming there, like some dark energy that was just like kind of gathered angst from all the kids at the school. It was dark. I just called it malignant because at the time that sounded like a name, but it never actually did anything. It was just there. One of the times I went to confront it, someone who was on the whole thing, and to the end agreed that he knew it was that 6 wasn't real. The one time I tried to confront that, they actually ran out of the auditorium and took off down the hall, and they had a bunch of my magical items. So I wound up chasing after him, even though I wanted to keep going with what was going on, but I was like, okay, well, here, face me. I don't have this, and I don't have this. And I actually took off all my necklaces, and I had a pouch at the time, which is something I do wear from time to time. And part of the deal with the pouch is you're not supposed to let anyone look in it. And I didn't really trust this person too well. I was like, look, I'll even take off my pouch if you will confront me. Face me now. And I handed them my pouch. And when I did, they turned and ran with it. So I don't know what would have happened next if I'd stayed because I didn't trust them to not get into my pouch. And I took off after them to get my pouch back when I handed it to them, they ran. Like, get back here with that, you bastard. So, anyways, um, yeah, in the end, if you're gonna make your being fair any complexity at all, and you want it to be able to do more than one particular purpose, I suggest creating it with the understanding that at some point it's gonna develop self-awareness. When doing this sort of thing, it is best, in my opinion, if you're going to go that far, to go ahead and give it an anchor point and an outside energy source. If it gets to the point of pure perception, of actually perceiving, then it has become its own thing, and just treat it accordingly. Now, the part I'm realizing we haven't talked about is what do you do if your servitor does attack you? We haven't discussed that at all. Um, my first bit of advice for that is put in a just in case button of some type. When you create it, have an understanding of what you can do to uncreate it, to remove its astral form. If it's gotten to the point that it's actually self aware and perceiving, removing its astral form will make it go away. That perception will continue to exist, but it might not even ever remember its beginning of how it started. Yeah. Once you perceive, you can never leave. If you create something that begins to perceive, you've created an actual other being, another soul, another member of the audience of the all thing. But just because it's begun to perceive does not mean its astral form that it possesses or material form or any of it that it possesses at that time is permanent. Only that act of perception. And this happens all the time. Anytime a decision must be made, that's how life begins in any reality. Is you have that moment within the random moving around of everything that something happens that a decision has to be made for anything to occur. That creates a moment of perception so that a decision can be made. And that's how life itself begins. So it's not even an anomaly or wrong when we create life in this way, but it is a good reason to treat things with respect, especially if you're going to allow it to continue as the being that it is, because now it is real. Now it requires reciprocity. And when you pass on, if it's something you've created with outside life force, that is learned to be self aware and perceive, it is something that will exist beyond you. Like I said, you've created an actual another member of the audience of the all thing. And that's not a bad thing. This is how the universe expands. That's quite the claim, isn't it? But it is. This is how perception expands. This is how we continue to grow. This is how the all thing in the audience accumulates. This is why the audience seeks out new, interesting things, because this is how it grows. This is how it functions. This is how we continue, is by the creation of new perception. And the perceiving of new things, individual, unique thoughts, unique information, unique ideas. This is where the entertainment comes in that keeps the audience viewing reality. Okay, so let's see. Got off track again. We're still supposed to be talking about what to do if one of your servitors attacks. Because maybe you didn't think about it. Maybe you didn't put it in the thing. A lot of times people say the best thing to do is say the creature's name backwards. I can't do that one myself. Because if I do that, my goddamn autism is going to destroy the creature at some point. Because anytime I say a word, my brain is wondering about what it sounds like backwards, what it sounds like if you change the vowels around, what it sounds like if you do this. I do this to sounds and words all the time. What if you pronounce the thing differently? Like the word Penelope. I'm always as soon as the first time I ever heard the name Penelope, I was like, oh, Penelope. And it's just how you pronounce different parts of it. It's so that one doesn't work for me, but that's a common one to use, saying its name backwards. But really, if it's a being you created, even if you didn't think of how to put anything, you can just decide what you do to destroy its astral form. If it's become self-aware, that'll take away everything except for its perception, but that perception won't remember to harm you. It's just gonna go find something else that matches its frequency. It's no longer the being it was, right? You've taken away its full sense of self, and you can do that because you created it. So, if a servitor is attacking you and you haven't decided a way that it can be destroyed, decide one and do it. It's as simple as that. Writing in a destruction clause. A lot of the stuff with creating servitors, like I said, it's a lot of legalese. It's a lot of like creating a contract with yourself about how this thing that you are creating works. That's why details are so important, why you want to work out loopholes, why you want to make sure that none of the information conflicts or or isn't cohesive with itself. Yeah, it all has to make sense. It all has to have purpose and reason so that the being can function properly. And when you don't have that, for one, if it's something you're trying to keep from being self-aware, it then has to make a decision. If it's making a decision about its own actions, about its how it moves and what it does, you're pretty much guaranteed to create some kind of sense of self because it has to make a decision about the self. And how can you make a decision about the self without perceiving the self? So there you go. Now it's self-aware. But if it is something that you were intending to be self-aware, this is what causes personality conflicts. This is what causes angst essentially within the being. This is what causes internal conflicts. You know, this is what causes essentially neurodivergence in your servitor. Things that might make it hard for it to perform its intended functions. Oh, speaking of neurodivergence, I did make a short. It is just a short from taken from the live, but I did make a short on how to make small talk with neurotypicals. That was kind of fun. Did that earlier today. I'll probably be releasing that tomorrow or Monday. Um, yeah. So destroying a servitor of your own, as I say, is as simple as that. Unless it's gotten complex enough that it's consider these things, and then it's the same kind of astral combat that you're going to be dealing with anything else. But if you have its anchor point, too bad for it, right? You have its anchor point. Worst case scenario, hit it with the selenite. And if for some reason you feel like that isn't enough, put it in salt water and dissolve all astral energy within it, and then hit it with the selenite again. Boil it if you want, whatever you feel you need to do to destroy the anchor point, with the intent of destroying the anchor point also removes its astral form. And there you go. So servitors attacking can be dealt with, even after the fact, fairly readily. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't treat them with respect, and reciprocity, and kindness, and do everything you can to make sure that this relationship goes right and is effective and cooperative and, you know, a positive thing. The kinder you are to your servitors, the more you take into consideration the fact that they should have experiences and joy, and the more work you put into the details of them, the more cohesive their form is going to be, the more potent they are going to be, the more they enjoy the experience of existing, the more powerful they are going to become. Yeah. And all these prevent the servitor from attacking you. So you use the salt water with the selenite? You can. You could these are I mean, they're separate techniques, but you could use them in combination. Like I said, just hit it with the selenite, and by that, if you remember from the last live, those of you that were on that one, you take your energy force starting from the belly up into the heart chakra, down the arms, the wrists, the hands, into the selenite, and imagine it coming out as a white energy that erases all energy patterns around it, and you can just blast the anchor point with that. A technique which was actually described in the Psychonaut last um, book club for dissolving a spirit was trapping it in in a crystal and then putting it in salt water with the intent of dissolving the energy patterns. You could do both at the same time, holding the selenite above the water and doing the salt water. Do not put the selenite in the water. I mean, for a moment, no problem. But if you drop the selenite in there and leave it in with the thing, it will dissolve. And not only that, the water will be toxic. Selenium, which is what selenite is going to turn into when it dissolves, is highly toxic. So you don't want to leave this, you don't want to put the selenite in the water for extended period of time. Like you can dip it in there. It's not going to dissolve like something made out of salt or sugar, but it will dissolve if you leave it in there. Like overnight, it's just going to come back and your selenite's going to be gone. And that water would be extremely toxic. I wouldn't suggest even touching it. So, for the most part, keep the selenite out of the water, but you could do both at once. You could even do those and then burn the thing after that if you wanted, just to be absolutely sure. But at that point, it's mostly about convincing yourself. Like I talked about when I was talking about exorcisms, about convincing the person that the ghost that they've created is gone. That's what you're doing here, is convincing yourself. Because all these things I said about do this, do that, that's what they're for. You have to believe it's gone. You can just believe that it's gone. You don't have to do any of these things. But you might need that ritual, especially if it's become a fairly powerful being. And if you've used outside life force energy, even more so. Now, if you've used outside life force energy, you're only going to wipe away the parts that you created. So there might be something left beyond the perception, but not if you're burning the anchor point, right? So you want to keep a hold of those. And honestly, really, my strongest advice here is, at least from this point forward, if you have any reason to think the thing might turn on you, have something written in from the beginning about what to do if that happens. But really, easier to write in things to prevent it from turning in the first place. Make sure its motivations are connected to your well-being. Of course, once it becomes self-aware, that's going to end at some point once you've passed on or whatever. But yeah, we want to treat everything. This is another reason why we want to treat all beings with respect. We want to treat all beings with reciprocity and respect, or with reciprocity. Treat all beings with reciprocity, because there are beings that don't treat others with respect, and you try to treat them with respect. Well, that's just going to get thrown back in your face. Kind of like the golden rule. The golden rule is treat others how you want to be treated, um, which is true. Treat others as you want to be treated, but if they treat you differently, treat them the same as they treat you. That's the way I think of it, anyways. And it's one of the concurrences, one of the primary concurrences of the horde. And I suppose the audience at large. Okay, so anyways, yeah, we're getting close to that 3 hour mark. Um, I'm gonna go ahead and open the floor back up to questions, comments, concerns. or treat others how they want to be treated. Yeah, as long as they treat you how you want to be treated, that's fine. But I suppose if that totally works, if you figure that how they treat you is how they want to be treated. My point is I'm not going to be nice to mean people. I'll be nice to nice people. But if somebody's mean to me, I'm not going to be nice back. I don't think that honestly helps the situation. I think that just makes them be mean to more people. But that is definitely off topic of the live, I suppose. Um, let's see. I have some servitor tank updates that may come to along soon, but the particular beings I'm working with right now in the servitor tanks, it seems like every time I film them or talk about them much in a public thing, there's an issue. So that's all the more I'm going to say about that for now. Until I feel even more confident. I will say the thing has gotten really big this time. Anyways, um, yeah, trying to think if there's any major updates about my life or anything. Paperwork is going pretty good, as well as it can for me actually immigrating to Canada. Still in that limbo position. Well, supposed to plug things at least once. I'm still in that limbo position where the only money I have really coming in is from this channel or from my spell work. So if you have any divinatory needs where you want someone that you know is going to actually tell you the truth rather than tell you what you want to hear, you can reach me at jeshuawittershins@gmail.com. And I do readings, well, depending on the level, from 20 bucks for a 3 card reading up up to well, it goes from there, but like an average reading about 50, $60. Do I have a familiar? Um, kind of what I'm working on now. Like, if I would say my altar servitor and what is becoming Mr. Spins would be the closest thing I have to a familiar. My dog, I sometimes would call my familiar, but it's like depends on how we define that term, right? Familiar. Some people would define that as any pet you have that is magically enhanced in any way, and Cootie most definitely, Cootie being my dog that passed away just before I moved up here. Um, Cootie most definitely had some enhancements. She was worked with some ritual. I did some rituals on her, and she did some rituals with me. She understood when I was doing magic, and through the use of one of my triopt cause, like the triops being the little creatures that I grow up from an egg with the intention of making a triop caw with them. Like after they die, I then reinflate the body and have been trying to use those to I've been trying to use those as a kind of cause servitor hybrid. Like it's basically a servitor soul bred within a living body and then reinflated as a caw. And unfortunately, the mind that they have isn't very powerful. But with one of those that I made, one that Herald of the Rocks, which is one of the first ones, I was it manifested well enough. I was able to use that to teach Cootie to track ghosts. Like she could hunt rabbit, grouse, bird, which was pheasant. She knew all kinds of different words, but one of them was ghost. And if I was had any reason to think there was a ghost around, I'd say, "Cootie, ghost," and she would look and see if there was a ghost, just like she would anything else. And she was actually quite good at finding them when they were there. But if there wasn't anything, then she'd look around and then she'd settle back down, and because she was a lot better at seeing them than I am. But that doesn't really count as a familiar. I actually have a new venture about to start, and I was hoping to get a reading on that for mine this month, and also a stick breaking on that recurring issue. Absolutely. Um, I hadn't really planned on doing a reading tonight, but let me maybe get the board ready there. I think it's ready. Okay. Oh, okay. I know what venture you're talking about. Took me a minute there. Um, I should be more prepared for these things. Okay. Got I do have both of my primary instruments out here. What just happened? There we go. Okay. Um, let me finish with the familiar thing, but I do have either the Wild Unknown Tarot available for the reading, or else we can do the my collective rune bag, like with all my charms bag. I don't have my actual regular rune bag with me for some reason. I think it's up in Felix and mine's bedroom, but I can do either one of those. First, let me finish this bit with a familiar thing, and then we'll get to that. Okay, so um, to me, to me that's a little different than a familiar, because, like I said, Cootie was able to do things on a magical basis. To me, a familiar is a spirit that is connected to you. Tarot cards. Okay. So yeah, the familiar is a spirit that's connected to you. Something usually isn't something that you make, but it can be. Like with my altar servitor. This is something I've made, but it's also um a part of me that just kind of grew up on its own. It was just there. Like, even before I called it my altar servitor, before I had those words, I just called it my chaos that was around me. And it's been building all this time. And it'll still be those things, to be clear. It'll still be it's like my chaos didn't stop building around me, my patterns, my weird would be a better word for it, twisting the way that it is didn't stop when I put it into my altar and started growing my altar servitor. And as my altar servitor grows, as Mr. Spins begins to twist into a material form, that won't make the altar servitor stop weaving. It'll simply add a level on top. It'll add a third aspect to the full form. So, do I have a familiar? Yeah, kind of. With the altar servitor and Mr. Spins as they begin. It feels silly even oh, I was gonna pin this. It feels silly keeping the name under wraps at all when I've said it many times. But to say it in direct connection and intent and intentionally, because like on a couple lives ago, I think I actually even just said the name in reference to them, if you're really paying attention. But um to speak it with the intent of revelation is another matter. So that's why we're not doing that yet, even though like I think well, I know I've said it at least once on this live, though it wasn't in direct connection to them. Okay, so you said you wanted to do the unknown tarot and a stick breaking. Get a stick. I believe I have one over here. There we are. This'll work. Oh, even better. Okay. So, hopefully the other camera is cooperating. I can remember how to do that. I don't have access to this feature. All right. I know what to do. Then I can make sure it's working before I. Okay, perfect. That is set up perfect. Now I'll come back over here. What the heck? There we are. Share. Okay. There we are. And I can come back over here so I can see your response. Now do remember that that is upside down to you. That is the one issue here. We're gonna do the 3-card spread. And perhaps a couple follow-up questions. Now, Oh, well, I was just about to start talking about shuffling and how a lot of people are against shuffling them like you would a regular deck of cards. To me, it just feels normal. And so it's what I do. And a lot of times, as long as the cards are well sorted before I begin, I will actually shuffle that way the number of times of cards I'm going to draw. So, like for example, in this case, I was going to shuffle the cards 3 times. But another rule that I have is that if while I'm shuffling the cards, cards fall out for some reason, then those cards need to be taken into consideration. Some people feel that these are just mistakes when you accidentally drop some cards. People do different things about this. To me, this is the ultimate bit of what would the word be that I'm looking for? Randomness. Divination requires random. It requires that element of randomness, to allow the chaos in. I know I've said many times I don't believe in the word random, but that's exactly it. We're not actually doing being random. We're tapping into the flow of symbolism and fate that is being woven around a particular question. And so, in order to do that, we allow these symbols to form in a way that we cannot control, but is connected to that moment of which we are asking about. Okay, so point is, some cards fell down. Let's see what we've got. Start with the High Priestess, Father of Swords upside down, Web, and then we got that guy, the Nine of Swords. But I'm looking at it and it's upside down for me. So there is that. um all right. So it's going to be a 4 card reading. And so the first one, indeed. Indeed. But the 9 of cards is upside down. So that's, you know, there is that. So the High Priestess. In this case, with the circumstance we're talking about, there is that aspect of wanting to create a new way forward, yeah? This wanting to create a Romestead. The whole goal of what it is we're up to and about with the solar punk thing. And then we have the Father of Swords upside down next to it, which in this case I'm seeing like the authority, right? the way hmm, how do I phrase that? That there's a lot of problems with, well, I want to say hierarchy, but not the hierarchy of the house, but of society. And like it's talking about, here's our problem. Okay. Here's our problem. Or here's what we want. Here's our aspiration, our goal, our intent. And one of the things blocking that, one of the first things blocking that is the Father of Swords upside down. And that what we are doing is straight up in conflict with the way things are supposed to be according to modern society. The whole solar punk concept and idea. There's going to be a backlash. People that feel like things should be a certain way, right? Even the being LGBTQ plus friendly is something that, like, the owl looks like he's clutching his pearls to me, and to you he's upside right. I realize that, right? That's the way. That's the way with the camera there. And then next we have the Eight of Pentacles, which in this case is talking about all the networks. I'm one of them people that read the tarot as much by the image than by anything else on the card, right? What the image is saying to me, what it is doing in my mind as I look at it, much more than what the Eight of Pentacles would mean if you were to look it up in the book of what do tarot cards mean. But I'm seeing a web, and I'm seeing social networks and an expanding outward. And in the last card, I mean, nobody likes to see the Nine of Swords, especially in this deck. And it is in the outcome position, but it's upside down. So it's about removing worry and doubt. Yeah. Like we can we can just talk about this a bit more in private after the live. I think we should maybe do a few more readings amongst ourselves. Yeah, we'll do that. I'll get a hold of you right after the live, and we will do that. Um, yeah, I mean, this isn't an all bad reading. Like I said, but nobody likes to see the Nine of Swords upside down like that. It seems to me that it is more about removing worry. We've got this idea of the solar punk utopia, all the things that we want to create with how we run the Romestead. And then we've got the Father of Swords upside down. as part of the obstacle. And I think that's mostly outside resistance. We do pretty good about keeping the hierarchy aspects out of the daily relations, I think. See, that's the problem with reading for somebody that you know is there is some bias there, but it also gives you insight. So we'll think on that a bit more. But the spider is definitely talking about social networks and expanding. And in the outcome is removing concern and stress and worry that the Nine of Swords typically represents. And it is expressed very dramatically in this particular um, deck of cards. But where it popped out of there, I do feel like it is significant. When I picked them up, the High Priestess was the only card that was face up. The rest of these cards were face down. This is the way they wound up dealing when they brought up to me. But like I said, we will do we'll have a bit more of a discussion on that after the live. I'll go ahead and get a hold of you and we will do that. Okay. So I also know what the stick breaking is for. And that's one that I'm going to assume. So come back over to here. That phrasing it the way you did, I'm not going to be stating on the live what the stick breaking is for. It'd be interesting to see what happens because we've had an immediate reaction with all the stick breakings before this, like less than 24 hours. Okay, correct. Also, what I would assume means correct, that I am correct on what I'm doing. The stick break, what recurring? Oh, it's the only recurring issue. We're good. Okay, here we go. It broke very clean. Broke very clean. There was a very strong resistance to the actual breaking. More so than I usually get with the chopsticks of that size. But that's all I have to report on that for the moment. Like I said, we can do some more reading in private here in a while. Okay, so one last time, open the floor back up to. Oh, you're absolutely welcome. I feel like we should continue in private from here rather than doing any more questions on the live itself. So I'm going to go ahead and put the cards away for now. Like I said, if anyone wants to do a reading, you can contact me at jeshuawittershins@gmail.com. The pinned posts there. And I also do spell work. Prices will vary depending on need and components. Also, I have a membership program. Lowest tier is 99 cents. And go up to the larger tiers. Romestead is at the tier where they get a free reading and stick break and 3 stick breakings every month, which can be done on the lives, but they do not have to be. I believe they're on the. Oh, anyways, the one for 3 stick breakings is 9.99, and the price of the next one is the one that Romestead is at, and you get a reading and this and the 3 stick breakings or 1 cord cutting. Okay, that's enough me plugging stuff. Um, Questions, comments, concerns. I've got a little bit of wine left in the glass here. After that, I'm gonna go ahead and go. So, if anyone has any questions, comments, or concerns, now would be the time. And of course, they don't have to be just on this live. Like if you have questions, comments, concerns about previous lives or in my other videos, I've noticed the number of people sticking with me to the end is rising, and that's pretty cool. Glad to glad I'm making new friends. Um, I got another link card since the last time I mentioned that on one of the lives. What else? Been doing a lot of interacting with my servitors in dreams. I suppose it's definitely a servitor related topic. Um, that is for me one of the most common ways to interact with my servitors actually is through my dreams. I'll just be dreaming and then all of a sudden the servitor appears in my dream and informs me whatever it needs to tell me. It's not the only way, especially with Manatellu at the beginning. Like, I couldn't because he was a messenger spirit supposed to tell me if anyone was messing with my camp. So, I can't be just suddenly falling asleep somewhere so he can talk to me. So that was very much just like an image inside of my mind, right? Seeing without my eyes, as opposed to seeing with your eyes open, which is what I call it when you're seeing the overlay of the astral and the physical realm on top of each other. I really got out of that. I really got to get out of the habit of switching back and forth between material realm and physical realm. The same thing. But I don't want to be confusing. Anyways, um, oh, brand of wine. I never did say that. Re Mi Fiesta del Sol. It's from Chile. It's pretty good for a $10 bottle of wine. We mostly have typically use it for cooking. I've been drinking it lately. It's not cooking wine. It's not like I'm sitting here drinking cooking wine, but it's not bad. It's good cheap wine. Works really well in sour cream, like in a sauce. You just cook whatever the stuff you're making, and then when you want to put your sauce in there, you simmer all your stuff in the wine for just a moment with like half a cup. or so. Simmer it all in there for just a little bit, and then splush the sour cream in and mix it all in till it's a nice kind of like half and half, about as much sour cream as wine. Mm, comes out real nice. Throw some thyme in there, some garlic. Very good. Like I said, I made a short about how to talk about how to speak neurotypical. Be coming out in the next few days. Hopefully, it wasn't too offensive. I sound horrible when I talk about neurotypicals. I'm not sure neurotypicals, other than a broad category, really exists. Like, there are people that think more like the norm, but in a general basis, like I say in the live, people that are good at small talk don't pay attention to what they're saying. They're barely paying attention. They're just kind of running little scripts. It's just small talk. It's just noise to make them. It's just noise to reassure everyone that you're friendly. As long as you follow the along with the script, or if the script don't make sense, jump the script and don't say anything too outlandish. They're not even going to notice. You can just jump topics. Small talk is easy. Just don't care. And I hope that's useful advice. At the same time, I'm wondering, oh, maybe that one of the things is maybe easier said than done. But you just have to internalize it, you know? Understand that it doesn't matter much unless they say something specific, if they answer, even in small talk, if they say something specific, you do need to something specific that you feel needs addressed. There isn't a way to just ignore it if they say something that's problematic, or actually asking a question. Because that's the one thing with small talk is it can sometimes get into larger talk. Hey, Stenosser, Stenostris, Stenostris. I'm gonna guess that's how it's pronounced. You kind of caught us here at the end. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns about servitors becoming self-aware, now is the time to voice some questions. But it's probably going to be pretty short at this point. Yeah, I've been doing it a lot the past like month or so. Usually, well, about 3.5 hours earlier from now is when I start. 8:30 Pacific time. I do it on Saturdays and Wednesdays. Wednesdays we were doing a book. We're doing a book club right now in the Libernal and Psychonaut. We're into the Psychonaut now, and we'll be doing that Wednesday. Got a bookmark. It would tell me. I'm like, I can't remember. But we're going from magical time to uh-oh. Let's go back and look at the live myself. I think from magical time to magical perspectives. We'll be talking about that Wednesday. And then we usually about 2 to 3 hours, sometimes 3.5. Got close to 3.5 this time. That being said, um, I do think it's time for me to go ahead and get off for the night. So, like I said, thank you to all of you who have been here. Thank you all to who have joined us, and a special thank you to all of those that stuck with me till the end of the live. And remember to like the live. If you're not a member of the channel, remember to like and subscribe so that you'll get notified and click that notification bell so that you won't miss the next one. Anyways, until next time, bright blessings and an interesting fate. This has been Sorcerer Tal.